Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures, self-knowledge. With your hosts, Daniel and Eduardo, this is the Know Thyself podcast. Labor 12th, the capture of the red cattle of Geryon. Within the sacred council chamber, the great presiding one revealed unto the teacher the will of what must be. Lost he is, and found, dead, yet vibrant with life. The server becomes the savior, and homewards turns. The teacher pondered. Then he called for Hercules. Before the last gate now you stand, the teacher said. One labor yet remains before the circle is complete, and liberation is attained. Proceed to that dark place called Erythea, where great illusion is enthroned, where Geryon, the monster of 3 heads, 3 bodies, and 6 hands, is lord and king. Unlawfully he holds a herd of dark red cattle. From Erythea to our sacred city must you drive this herd. Beware of Eurytion, the shepherd, and his 2-headed dog, Orthrus. He paused. One caution I can give, he added slowly. Invoke the aid of Helios. Through gate the 12th, the son of man, who was also the son of God, departed in search of Geryon he went. Within the temple, Hercules made offerings to Helios, the god of fire in the sun. For 7 days he meditated, and then a favor was bestowed on him. A golden chalice fell upon the ground before his feet. He knew within himself that this bright object would enable him to cross the seas to reach the land of Erythea. And so it was. Within the safe protection of the golden chalice, he sailed across the tossing seas until he came to Erythea. Upon a strand in the far, far country, Hercules debarked. Not long thereafter, he came upon the pasture land where the red-hued cattle grazed. Guarded were they by the shepherd Eurytion and the double-headed dog, Orthrus. When Hercules approached, the dog sped forward like an arrow to its target. Upon the visitor, the creature hurled itself, snarling viciously, bared fangs fiercely snapping. With one decisive blow did Hercules lay the monster low. Then Eurytion, fearful of the brave warrior who stood before him, supplicated that his life to be spared. Hercules conceded his request. Driving the blood-red cattle before him, Hercules turned his face toward the sacred city. Not far had he gone when he perceived a distant cloud of dust that rapidly grew larger. Submersing that the monster Geryon had come in mad pursuit, he turned to face his foe. Soon, Geryon and Hercules stood face to face. Breathing fire and flame from all 3 heads at once, the monster came upon him. Geryon hurled a spear at Hercules that almost hit its mark. Stepping agilely aside, Hercules evaded the deadly shaft. Stretching taut his bow, Hercules let fly an arrow that seemed to burn the air as he released it, and struck the monster squarely in the side. With such great impetus had it been shot that all 3 bodies of fierce Geryon were pierced. With a shrill, despairing groan, the monster swayed, then fell, never more to rise. Toward the sacred city, then, Hercules drove the sleek red cattle. Difficult was the task. Again and yet again, some cattle strayed, and Hercules would leave the herd in search of errant wanderers. Across the Alps, he drove his cattle into Italy. Wherever wrong had triumphed, he dealt the powers of evil a deadly blow, and righted the balance of favor of justice. When Eryx, the wrestler, challenged him, Hercules cast him down so forcefully that there he stayed. Again, When the giant Clinias threw a rock that weighed a ton at Hercules, the latter caught it on his club and hurled it back to kill the one who sent it forth. At times he lost his way, but always Hercules turned back, retraced his steps, and journeyed on. Through wearied by this most exciting labor, Hercules at last returned. The teacher awaited his coming. "Welcome, O son of God, who is also a son of man," he greeted the returning warrior. "The jewel of immortality is yours. By these 12 labors have you overcome the human and put on the divine. Home have you come, no more to leave. Upon the starry firmament your name shall be inscribed, a symbol to the struggling sons of men of their immortal destiny. The human labors ended. Your cosmic task began." From out the council chamber came a voice that said, "Well done, O Son of God." Welcome to the Know Thyself podcast. I'm here with Daniel.
Hello.
I'm Eduardo, and it's good to see you this morning, my friend. And, very excited to talk to you. I know that we've had a couple days to think about how we wanted to start this final chapter of the Labors of Hercules, which is so crazy to think that it's been a whole year that we've talked about, each sign, but also its significance within the story and the breakdown, and this set of all the stories that we've talked about. And there's a few out there actually that kind of came to mind within the Labors of Hercules related to the zodiac signs that were sort of vague. But yesterday when you told me that this is a very vague story, and I was glad to hear you say that, because there's so much to unravel and there's so much to break down, but there's also the story itself is very straight to the point. I'm not sure if you heard the narration prior to, but definitely, there's some room for interpretation, like always. And so it really kind of solidifies how this was written and why the interpretation of each zodiac has its, meaning based on not just the labor, but also what we know about our journey through the wheel. And so I'm excited to talk about Pisces because it has also that sort of that, not that energy to it, but that sort of significance to it from our perspectives, or from our understanding of the breakdown, because we've done so many, we've had so many discussions on each labor and then the breakdown of the sign, and to finally come to an end, there's just like a lot that I know we can sort of conclude, from everything we've learned. And so I will let you take it away, man. There's a lot that I know we want to cover in this first one, and I know there's going to be way more to cover when we actually break down the signs. So let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pisces, when we approach Pisces in the study of astrology, it is the most vague of the signs. We spoke about when we were breaking down Capricorn that it's a very mysterious sign, but it's mysterious in a different kind of aspect. Capricorn was mysterious because not a lot of people go in depth with the depthness that's contained within Capricorn and really look at its fundamental esoteric aspects. Where Pisces, the vagueness, as much as you explore and as deep as you go with Pisces, there's still not a lot of clarity. It's a non-linear sign. It's a sign that's in between time. It's an in between space as well. It's, it's within and it's without. It's kind of what we kind of call the in between. Pisces, when you're even looking at the 12th house of the zodiac, when you're looking at natal charts, the 12th house doesn't only tell us about how we end like the latter years of our life, like after your third Saturn returns. It will talk about your dreamscape, but it also talks about the gestation period when you were inside your mother. And so it's kind of this alpha omega sign. And so it's very, very unique in regards to it's beyond words.
Okay.
You can't really collapse the idea of Pisces in the spoken word nor the written word. And so if we really wanted to do Pisces justice, we probably should just be silent for the next hour and a half, right? And just not say a thing. And that would actually be the best way to describe Pisces. It's It's very unique.
That's interesting.
And even when you look at the Last Supper, we've used the Last Supper as kind of as a median to understand these zodiac signs as we've gone from left to right of the 12 disciples with Jesus in the middle. If you look at Pisces at the end, he's not saying anything. You have Capricorn and Aquarius right there, philosophizing, thinking about the future, complex ideas, where Pisces closes the circuit and he just has his hands up. And that's what you kind of find with Pisces. You get all the way to the end and you realize it was all right here. It was all in front of me. Right. Capricorn and Aquarius, they're really upset because they think that their prophet is going to get killed. And Pisces is just there with his hands open. And he's like, don't you see? The Son of the God is at the table with us right here. It's all right in front of you.
Interesting.
And that's what we kind of learn with Pisces. And Pisces is a unique sign because it's an accumulation of all the signs that came before it. So if you have a strong Pisces placement, as we were going through the labors of Hercules, it might have been confusing because every labor that we went through, you were like, that's me. Oh, wait, no, that's me. No, this is me. It's because it contains all of them.
Right.
And so it's not only is it this containment of all of these energies, it's the omega and the alpha. It's the sleep we go to when we go through the process of death. And it's also the sleep when we were in the womb getting ready for the next life. It embodies everything. And so it's this, not only is it non-linear, but it's non-personal. And so there's not even like a personal attachment that Pisces have with it. It's like they're in between this and what comes next.
Right.
They're always kind of in that mystical approach. And with this, we're going to see a high capacity for, psychic exploration, intuition, amazing artists and innovative thinkers come out of Pisces.
Right.
But because of that not truly being here, we also see addiction. We see depression. All of this idea of not being able to even identify with the self is something that the Pisces kind of encounters. And Pisces it's a whirlwind of energies.
Totally.
It's the sea that we find ourselves in. And so Pisces are so receptive of not only their own personal energies, but the energies of the entire world outside of them.
Right.
And that's going to be something that we're going to kind of see Hercules, face in this 12th zodiac sign. But it really is this unique accumulation of everything that's come before. And it's kind of like that process of, how we go to when we die. It's like a idea of going to sleep and waking up into the next life. And same process of what brought us here. The Pisces almost represents the pineal gland where the soul enters the body, as well as when the soul is going to leave the body. And so it's hard to place. It's hard to kind of put our fingers on it. And that's kind of why this labor is written in a way that's almost non-personal.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, I like the way you covered all of that just because, I guess I think we're going to repeat ourselves with the second breakdown of Pisces with a lot of these, breakdowns. But one of the things you said about it's, the counterpart to Pisces, where not the counterpart, but the opposite of what could occur with this absorption, because it is a water sign and it's a mutable sign. And, taking in all that and absorbing all of the other energies, if you were to hear or understand the entire journey that Hercules just went through in all 12 signs and nothing came of it, well, then you just went through a series of trauma. If there was no victories that were, seen towards the end of each labor, then you just went through 11 very a trial period of just like ups and downs with a lot of, just a lot of disappointment if you didn't succeed each one, and in this case, obviously Hercules or mankind has been into every house and has been able to gain the wisdom of each, labor, each period and each energy that comes with each house or each sign. And I think that towards this end period, that's sort of the summation or the summary of where Hercules or mankind stands. It's like you were able to absorb all 12, but you were also able to interpret a piece of each to make you evolve or help you evolve, as we always say, to the next octave. And I think that's what's fascinating about how this story was written, is that, it gave us the opportunity to feel the gain of each sign and each labor that Hercules went through. And for that, we are able to move on to the next. But I think if you didn't have an understanding of what, each labor encountered, if you were Hercules, metaphorically speaking, well, then you would just kind of be absorbing this trauma for each labor, coming towards an end and finding yourself very, 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 very low, with a lot of weight that sort of sinks you down. And I know that we're going to bring that up a lot with Pisces, on people who don't know how to take on all these energies at the same time, and because of that, they end up falling into maybe habits of addiction, or maybe nothing positive comes from having so many attributes happening all at one time. I think that could definitely have detrimental effects on an individual who doesn't put that to good use. And so, again, with Hercules, we obviously see that for every step he took, he was able to succeed onto the next. And so here we are at the very end. And I like what you said about the Last Supper. I think that's a great way to present that energy of everybody sort of concerned with the world savior, having to sacrifice himself and having to pass on physically and spiritually onto the other side. But having Pisces just kind of saying, look, like, this is what it's all about. This is what it's always been about. And so I definitely want to get into that, whether it's in this episode or the next episode, because that is very interesting to hear you say that. So,
well, yeah. And, it's so interesting because when you think about the Last Supper and you look on the far left and you see Aries, there's this eagerness to go headfirst into life and it wants to obtain experiences so it ultimately can collect wisdom. And as you kind of go through all of the disciples and you make your way, you see this gaining of this ultimate wisdom. And Pisces is that moment when, you think you have to go on these pilgrimages. You think we have to go to these medicine retreats. We think we have to do these things which are so good for your spiritual development, right? Going on these adventures. But you get into the end of your yoga class. You get to the end of like a sacred weekend dealing with medicine, deep esoteric study. And there's that moment that, oh dear, it's always been right here.
Right.
I didn't need to go anywhere. It was always within. The Christ was within. And that's what we find with Pisces. It was right here. Right. It was always right in front of me, and I just didn't see it. And so within Pisces, it really is this alpha omega. It's the ending of one cycle, and it's the womb of what comes next. And so this is often the point of when we are getting ready to take a step to the next octave. And it kind of is this unique kind of murkiness that we kind of see with the waters of Pisces, but it's to give birth to something new that Aries is going to retake over. Because remember, this cycle and this circle is sepraternal. It's going to keep going over and over again. You're not just at one stage and you're done. You make your way back, but you're a new individual. Like that idea, no individual steps into the same river. Not only is it a different river, but it's a different person. And that's what we kind of see here. And it's that preparation for the gestation for what the next adventure is and what the next process of growth is going to be to further our unfoldment. And so it really is this unique period. And Pisces also marks the idea of connecting to collective energies. So we were thinking about the other water signs, right? Which was like the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th. So the 4th was Cancer, and that's like the birth of life. We have Scorpio, where we learned about spiritual death and rebirth. Well, the 12th house deals with cycles as well. If the 4th house is like the cycles and patterns of early childhood, the 8th house is cycles and patterns that we create as an adult. The 12th house is collective cycles and patterns. This is the archetypal realm. It doesn't make much sense. There's no personal connection with a lot of these energies because they're collective. This is what, Jungian psychology looks at as like the anima and the animus. Well, that anima and animus energy, when you approach it, is confusing because it's not a personal trauma you're going through. It's a collective experience that the universe is, as a whole, is evolving through. And so, it's easier when we're going through, when we're looking at cycles and patterns as like our childhood of looking at, traumas or, relationships we made with things that weren't completely appropriate to truth, and we have to like realign our relationship with the experience. Well, the 12th house is foreign. It doesn't have to be personal to you. This could be the collective energies of all of humanity. This could be energy that's within your bloodline that you're actually helping to solve and heal past incarnations of like your blood tribe. It's not personal. You can't like linearly point to it like this is where the trauma was and this is what I'm healing. So there's like this foreign aspect about it because, and it can be it can sweep you away. And we start to see this like sweeping away of the collective. And I think that that's a unique theme to take on when you approach this story. Everything in this story attacks Hercules.
Yeah.
Where, in the past stories, Hercules would be on the offensive and he would make the first move he would see the thing he was supposed to overcome and he would make the move first. It was like he made the first chess move. Well, in this one, we're not the white pieces of chess that goes first. We're the black pieces. So we have to wait for the move to come and he's responding to it. Well, this is what Pisces is. How do you respond to the collective energies of what's happening in the aggregate? How do we respond to what's happening in, on the TV? How do we respond to the spiritual evolution and growth of, the individuals around us? It's monumental, and you can definitely, water is that unique thing that can be very refreshing and replenishing, but it can also drown you. And unfortunately, a lot of Pisces feel that feeling of drowning. And again, we all have Pisces somewhere in our zodiac. And this is where you really feel the collective energies in this like very heightened, sensitive awareness.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. I liked your analogy to the chessboard, just because you're absolutely right. In this case, he has to wait for the challenge to approach rather than strategically, always thinking about or being one step ahead. Right now you have the knowledge of everything that's occurred. How are you going to respond to all of this coming to you? And so that was some of the questions I had about, and I think the way you placed that, and I hope the same for the listeners with that analogy of the chessboard, really kind of helps me put this all into not necessarily perspective, but almost into a category that is able to be digestible based on everything we've learned thus far. Because, if I may, in the beginning of the myth, and I know you guys already probably heard this, but the quote that I like here, which says, "Lost he is and found, dead yet vibrant with life. The server becomes the savior and homeward turns." And right away, they're kind of just letting you know everything that you sort of spoke about just now. So I think, you did a beautiful job at but to actually bring that to light. Just because, I think the knowledge of knowing that this is the end, but there's a new beginning, can sort of not perplex someone, but sort of make you go, well, what's next now? Well, what is next? Did I really learn everything? You can kind of probably fall into a thought process of, was it enough? Were the lessons enough for me to take on the next octave? And based on how he handles this last labor, you see that he has, come to that crossroad, but also has no doubt in his mind on how to approach this. And so, fascinating, man.
Yeah. And, Pisces is representative of the two fish. It's we'll talk about it later, how it represents the 2 feet. Right. And like the lymphatic system of how we move water through our body. But with the 2 fish, we really come to this understanding of life is 2 sides of a coin here. in this process of, incarnating in this five sense reality, there's duality. And now we're trying to get to that wholeness and see the complete picture, but you can't have life without death.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have light without darkness. It's so we really start to see that component that you need both of these aspects. We talked about it even in the process of alchemy. There's things in this life that we need to be assertive and dominate, and there's things that we need to surrender to. It's this unique balance that comes in between. And this is more of that idea of like becoming a gray and not being too one-sided to the other. And that's going to be, it's quite the lesson, because, when we kind of get into spirituality, there is that moment where we jump into it and everything is love, light, rainbows, and cupcakes, right? But then you realize that, oh no, there's a process of my shadow.
Right.
There is darkness here. There is processes of, things need to die for life to continue on. And that's what we really see here. And, we've always kind of talked about, life and death will happen, but what's eternal? And that's also what we kind of learn in Pisces is what is eternal, what does not go back into the box,
yes,
and what stays and what sustains. And that's where Hercules is going to kind of find himself. And it's really in this role of, in Pisces, we finalize the idea that we are all one. And so we can't leave anybody behind in this process.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we go through our own personal, saving of our soul and connecting to that process of enlightenment, well, now we kind of come back and we take that energy and share it through this unconditional love that Pisces ultimately is going to crown us with. And how we actually do that in a responsible way.
Right.
While still not impeding on people's growth. Because Pisces, we give unconditional love, but we still don't do the work for others. It's like the idea of the cocoon. Like you and I could be walking through the forest and I'm like, oh, dude, check this out. It's a cocoon. And I run over there and I'm like, I bet there's a butterfly in here. And I crack it open and it's just goo because it hasn't gone through the complete transmutation process. So even understanding, intuitively how to assist people on that growth is what we kind of learn here without being too impeding on it.
Yeah.
And, not allowing the strength to actually be created by that sovereign individual.
I like the way you said to relate to that about being the gray, because, back to what you said regarding spirituality, there is a process that I think, that is all roses and rainbows, where you're ready to take on the understanding of the metaphysical, plane, or understanding, how to raise your vibration. But one of the things that, for me, I've learned is being at peace with, and this is something that is also in the myth of Hercules, which is the lower self desires not being severed.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find a compartment or a way to place them into your pocket and take them with you. It's not something that I think people really consider when they're on a spiritual journey, is that they think they're going to sever all these lower desires, or at least the negative sides of themselves. And that's not the case here. The case is to have an understanding of them, and also peace with them, and also figure out how they can aid you, but not necessarily eradicate them completely. Mm-hmm. And I know that people suffer with that. I mean, I've definitely had my experiences where you think you're evolving, or you believe you're evolving, and you feel it. You feel more compassion and more love towards others. But it's not so much that your spirituality has allowed you to have an open mind towards people who are still sort of living in those lower desires. It's more that you know what they are, and then it's something that they're going to have to make peace also with themselves. And so you just sort of don't focus so much on that. You don't tell them that they need to get rid of them. You just sort of give them the space to, go through the process that you're talking about within the cocoon. And I think that that's what makes things very unique for each individual. And I think a Pisces, or at least in this sign of Pisces, having that understanding is what's going to help the others on this path, is that you knowing a little bit about all of them will give you the ability to make room and make space for that growth, rather than just, going head on and saying like, hey, this is what you are. It's like, no, all these attributes that we all carry have their own process in regards to growth. But you as a Pisces, or the observer, after passing through this entire wheel, should just kind of sit back, kind of like we said again, which I love about the Last Supper, is sort of saying like, didn't you see, like, the whole time it's always been here? You can go through that wheel as many times as you want, but if you don't make peace with this and sort of understand what this process looks like, you'll just keep going through these labors. So yeah,
it becomes a carousel,
right,
and it's the carnal carnival that we find ourselves in, and so and it really is true, because in Pisces, we approach ideas as unconditional love. Loving without expectation is a very difficult thing to do, because, even as when I was a school teacher, that was a very difficult thing. Like, not setting up expectations that, well, was this my expectation for the spiritual growth of this individual, or the soul's growth of this individual, or is it like their expectation? Like, are they in alignment with this? And so even when it kind of comes to like how we nurture growth in people, there's this aspect of like, you don't know that individual's path, but you can assist them with love, unconditional love, helping them see objective truth, and supporting their spiritual sovereignty. And those are the three big pillars that we learn in Pisces. And it's something that we really need to obtain, because my path is different than your path.
Right.
Your path is different than my path. And so I can't come here and be like, this is what you have to do exactly. But I can fan the flame of introspection. I can fan the flame of self-love for you. And you can do the same for me. But in regards to where our spiritual feet are taking us with Pisces, well, that's between God and me. You know what I mean? That's between you and God. I have no say on that. And honoring that is also something that we do in Pisces. We learned how to do it in Aquarius, and it really gets solidified to not only honor our own path, that stays between God and I. Well, that's between God and them, and there's a connection between all of us when we allow that natural organic unfoldment to blossom. And that's what Pisces is kind of looking at, and at the same time, it's this beautiful story that's kind of like unfolds in front of us.
Right.
And one of the things that was just a pattern, because this is archetypal patterns that we're talking about with the 12th sign, is I think it's really great how the council, the presiding one, the teacher, and the hero are completely unified at this point. Who was your guru? He's looking right in the mirror at you. You know what I mean? You are your own guru. And that's kind of what Pisces is. It's like almost like you looking in the mirror and just be like, oh, I am. Like, the Christ doesn't live outside of me. The Christ isn't just in the Bible. The Christ wasn't just somebody born in Bethlehem. It was born within me, and I am the vehicle of it. I am the vessel. I am the golden chalice. And that's what we're really going to kind of see, is that, I am the womb of Christ, and it's within me. And that's what we're going to nurture, protect, and then ultimately share with others. And that's what Pisces is all about. That's why the prophet of the age of Pisces was Jesus. And we always see Jesus with that illuminated heart, because not only did he find his own internal enlightenment, but he took that internal alignment and pushed it out and shared it with the world. And that's why you always see, like we spoke about before, in like 7-day candles in Catholicism, if you ever look at Jesus's or Mary's heart, it's always like 3D. It's coming at you, because Jesus was very charitable. Even with like esoteric Christianity, although they might read the Bible in a linear way, and they might have, beliefs that are constricting to the evolution of consciousness, they are usually very charitable organizations. They're very giving. Right. And that was something that was coming through this was, you have to come back and give your energy. It's not just being on this process is not just escaping this. Like, yeah, you escape the attachment to the form, you escape the identification with the cube, but that doesn't mean that we can just like go live somewhere and try to see this whole process of like, I just need to escape the body. Once you escape the cube, you come back and you show other people the way out of the cube. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the collective,
Right.
And it's all about the I, which we all have, which is that spiritual center. And so, yeah, it's a really unique telling of this story. And again, there's a lot of different variations of the 12th labor of Hercules. But I like how it goes back to investigate other things that we've seen, like even with the things it's opposed with, that it's challenged. Well, these weren't the first times we were challenged with some of these things, like the mental, the physical, and the emotional body. Well, now we're doing it on the collective. What happens when you start to heal yourself? You start healing the group. And this is what the latter parts of alchemy were very much looking for. The first 4 parts of alchemy, the first 4 steps of alchemy, is more of the incorporation of the personal shadow. And the latter steps of alchemy are more of the healing and the incorporation of the collective shadow. That's when we really start to connect with the universal father and the universal mother. And we start to understand these bigger archetypal patterns that are operating always behind the scenes, and we're just seeing the reactions of. So again, we're getting to the roots. We're getting to the true seed of the matter of what is going to help, relinquish some of the suffering that we experience in this human consciousness.
Yeah, well said, man. The thing I take away from most of not only this breakdown and the understanding of what looking at that seed actually represents is that one of the things I think a lot of people get wrong in regards to, say, we'll use Jesus for the sake of Pisces, is that his spiritual empathy for, the wretched and for the downtrodden wasn't so much that it laid in his forgiveness for those people. It's his understanding of where it stems from and saying they're on their process as well. Because you hear this in the esoteric about how he forgives and says, forgive them for they not know, where they're coming from and what, and you think, oh my gosh, this is a man who had not only unconditional love and wisdom, but this compassion for people who wanted to wish death upon him. And it's not so much now that he just was so peaceful or such a sage that he sort of could pardon these people. It's that he had that understanding ultimately of, they're on their journey, and this is the process that they're in right now. Like, if there's a way to look at it in a linear perspective or point of view, this is where they are, and therefore I can forgive them. I can let them pass, because they're if they don't get it now, they'll get it later. And so I'm not going to worry so much about hating on those people, because you've always found a lot of followers of Christ who understand more or less what the goals are for humanity and what the Savior wanted for humanity's ability to raise themselves to the heavens. But there's also this sort of other side to it, right? Which is like, if you're not on my side, then I wish death upon you. And if you're not on my side, then you're on the wrong side. And Christ never even speaks of that. He never says that. He never says, hey, if they don't agree with us, the collective, in this spiritual path, then they are, they will be, condemned to hell. It's like, there's not really a lot of that, even though it's been rewritten several times in the Bible and people interpret things differently about, what side is the right side. But I think this is the ultimate, lesson that I like of Hercules in his journey, is that he's seen this full, the wheel in its totality, but also the ability to, go from here into the cosmos, as it's said. It's like, this is, you had to get to this point to then see the more broad and more cosmic perspective of all of our souls and what they connect to in this universe. And I think that's what Christ already had the ability to do, only he brought it all the way back to this, realm of flesh, and people, I don't think, had the ability to even, fathom what that really meant. They're like, oh, it's very simple, right? I just got to be kind. I just got to be loving. And then I'll just ascend to the heavens. And he never says yes or no to that. But I think the lesson is you're here to see it all, so that when you do see, the roots of where it all stems from, then the real work can start. And that's what Hercules has done. You hear towards the end, and I'll use that quote again. I don't want to skip all the way to the end, but it says, the human labors ended, your cosmic task began. From out of the council chamber came a voice that said, well done, O son of God. And so, just powerful, man, to be able to see that and to understand that through the labors, not just through the idea of Christ on his journey. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, again, this is why it's so important to study the words of all the prophets rather than the organizations that were formed after them, because we've done a lot speaking about the separation between exoteric spirituality and esoteric spirituality. And we've defined it earlier as the exoteric is the outer teachings and esoteric is the inner teachings. But another way to think about exoteric and esoteric is the exoteric separates, the esoteric unifies. And that's ultimately what religion is. Religion, when you break it down into its Latin roots, religare is to pull back, and it's to pull back and pull you back to the source, pull you back to the spark of why you are here. Well, we've seen religion used a different kind of way. To pull back, it's to actually pull back on your spiritual progress. And that's what we get with exoteric religions. It separates. It's my God versus your God, where true Gnostic Christians knew it was just one God. The Sufi poets, Rumi, when he was talking about my beloved, he wasn't just talking about Muhammad. He was talking about the source of all life.
Right.
The Jewish mystics, all of these individuals understood that there was one power, there was one universal life force energy, one original generator, and everything else is just an emanation from that, us included. Right. And that's where this process of Hercules really starting to see this, and he sees the God in others. So even for individuals that are, down and broken, you can see goodness in them. There's goodness in everybody. And that's what this process is, that eternal light that we see in Pisces of like, oh, it's all within. Well, it's the same thing with some of the most tyrannical, terrible individuals that have been in this experience. There was goodness inside, but it got buried. It got buried with indoctrination. It got buried with the attachment to the cube, and they became robotic, and they lost that connection. And so, it's this interesting story as we kind of make our way as Hercules kind of, explores this journey. And one of the big things that I love in this is he has a stage in the beginning before he starts his journey where he does 7 days of meditation.
Yeah, he prays.
And this is very important because Pisces represents the magical realm of life. Pisces represents that space of meditation, because again, if Cancer, the first sign of water, breathing in is life. And so when we breathe in, we're being born anew. And then Scorpio, the breathing out, which is death. Well, Pisces is the space in between breaths. Well, that's actually when you're alive. You're not going through a process of rebirth or death. And so it's in the space in between breaths that you can actually just be. And in that contemplation, in that space, we can really connect to the beloved that's within inside. And that's actually where we can find peace and connect to that universal life force. And this is why the process of meditation, whatever your relationship with it, is so important. And it doesn't mean that, your meditation is going to be personal, just like your nutrition, just like how you define what the universal life force is. You're allowed to kind of have your own personal relationship with it. But we do need to find some sort of meditation practice. Some people can sit and be quiet on a pillow, and sit straight up. Some people do it lying down. Some people go for long car rides. Some people do it through walks. It can come through so many different ways, but connecting to that space in between breaths is so important to have a personal relationship with that force and feel it emanating within us. And one of the things we're going to kind of see with Pisces here is this Helios connection, is the idea of taking that insight, taking that connection with the universal life force beyond the space of just meditation. It's really easy to have spiritual connection when you're in that shavasana of yoga, when it's all done. Super easy to be spiritual, super easy, after reading like Manly P. Hall, to have these understanding of these higher principles, right? Or reading the Bible or something like that, or in any ancient religious text. Very easy to be in a space of spiritual awareness and spiritual sight. But what happens when you get off the mat? What happens when you go and you get in your car and you're sitting in traffic? What happens when you're, dealing with maybe a difficult person at the grocery store? Do you still see through that eye? Do you still see through that spiritual sight? And that's something that golden chalice is going to, and that golden ring is going to serve him as keeping that spiritual sight during the storm. How do you keep that spiritual awareness and that spiritual protection as you meet the waves of life? Because, whether you're the greatest manifester in the world, there is still going to be unexpected things that happen in your life. And some people have a capacity to manifest easier than others, but either way, there's going to be a counteraction to everything. And there's going to be, you're not the only individual manifesting here. Mm-hmm. There's other people who have intentions, and there's also, the collective intentions and the evolution of consciousness that's operating. And so it's not just you, it's this personal interplay between the micro and the macro. Well, how do you respond to the macro waves? Mm-hmm. And that's what that golden chalice is going to be. It's that protection to be able to survive the waves, because one thing we definitely know is the waves keep coming. This process never gets over. If anything, it gets almost more challenging, and we're faced with bigger obstacles that we have to overcome as we do through the process of spiritual maturation. It never just gets easy. The Zen Buddhists, everybody's just like, oh, I want to get to that pace where it's so peaceful. No, they've obtained that peacefulness. They're still feeling the traumas of this five-sense reality. They just have created this orb of protection to not allow them to sink into that bestial counterpart, and they stay elevated. They stay in this Christ consciousness, and that's truly what is the savior of the world, is, maintaining that Christ consciousness beyond just being in temple or in prayer. And how do you operate being in prayer 24/7?
Yeah. I think one thing I've, learned from, again, in the labors and through the process of everything you just spoke about, is making peace with not only that which you can't control, but also making peace with the disappointment that'll continuously come. Because I personally have always felt that anytime a challenge that I've had to face comes once, twice, or three times, by the fourth time, you're a master of rebuilding, and there's a peace within you, not necessarily an anger anymore of having to start over from the beginning. Every time it happens, you have a little more knowledge from the last time it happened, so therefore you walk through it with more peace and less anger. And I think that if you go unscathed, or if you don't have these mistakes happen to you, when it does happen to you, it can really set you back, because you think, how has my God betrayed me? How have I been betrayed for everything I've done so well up until now? And now you take down my house. I have to start all over again. I think as long as it happens once, twice, or more, every time you will build your foundation all over again, a little stronger and a little better. and with less of a surprise if it happens again and again, and I think that that's something Hercules showed really well up until this point, is that, expect the unexpected, but also, feel that this is for the better of not just yourself, but the people around you and the humanity that you're supposed to, lead in this Christ consciousness, or in this higher level of consciousness. It's that, the suffering that has occurred within you is something that's going to allow you to help and aid those in current suffering, or be there when their suffering is at its most difficult. And I think Pisces can do that very well, where, they're there to not only help others. I was listening to this other podcast in regards to Pisces and Pisces energy, and the individual speaking was saying one thing that's very exhausting is that a Pisces can take on everybody's, misfortune. And it's easy for them to be around a Pisces, because then they go, hey, I feel much better whenever I'm around you. It's like, well, yeah, you just emotionally dumped everything onto me, and I just absorbed it through this, mutable water sign. But you having an understanding of how to not take it on and make peace with it will be, something that you'll have to master one day. And I think that's what he's done very well.
Yeah, absolutely. In moving from that self-pity to compassion and self-understanding. And in Pisces, we meet a new realm. And in Pisces, this is the state of where practitioners of magic work. And there's different laws and operations that are contained within that, of how do you not only open the magical circle, but how do you close the magical circle? And that's something that almost like a Pisces needs to learn. It needs to learn to cleanse itself. It needs to learn to, it's an amazing thing that it can be so sensitive to the collective energies. But the universe gives you that special quality with the desire that you learn the responsibility comes with that sensitivity.
Okay.
And that's the idea that you don't have to carry this energy, but you have to learn how to cleanse yourself. You have to learn how to remove that energy, because, and you have to go through unique kind of spiritual practices to do that. Pisces, if they go out into the world, they need to have some sort of ritual when they get home to clear off their energy. And it could be something as simple as like a brush by the door that they just like brush off their hands, or maybe even like an unlit sage stick, right? But you don't want to carry that energy into the house, because your loved ones don't deserve that energy. You don't deserve to carry that energy. You definitely don't want to take it into your bed, because Pisces is the dreamer. Well, you want to be kind of collecting with your own personal spiritual growth through dreaming. You don't want to be just tapping into collective dreams, because it's hard for a Pisces to kind of look at, where do I start and where do I end? And where do they end and where do they begin? Because it's the sign of blending, and they blend into everything. Now, that is one of the most amazing things that you can do. This is why individuals with strong Pisces energy are the ones that have a high capacity for intuition, psychic abilities, creativity. They're brilliant. But the problem is they have to learn how to focus that energy, because they're so brilliant. And so, to be that broken record, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Pisces has that great responsibility, because they have the ultimate power of being connected to the collective in such an intimate way. And it is a struggle for Pisces just to find their own personal identity. It's good for a Pisces to look in the mirror and have to say, I am, and to understand the ebbs and the flows. I think the one of the best things for a Pisces to study is actually Taoism. Taoism will give a Pisces such a better understanding, because, like we're in this room right now, right? And we see the walls of this room. And so we see the form and we see the structure, which allows this room to exist. But it's not the walls that make this room special. it's the invisible space in between. So it's the understanding of how the invisible works, because it's not the walls that contain these conversations. It's not the walls that, carry the love of the kitchen table for the family to come together. It's the space in between where that happens. It's the invisible. And Pisces sees the significance of the invisible. We think about these structures in our life. Well, the life happens in the space between. The life happens in between the lines. The life happens in the spaces. And we don't think about that very often. And so, just like in Taoism, we have this conversation that, even when that was being constructed as a philosophy, the individual that created it was like, I'm doing a disservice by even writing this because it can't be explained.
Interesting.
And it's true. And that's why that is such a great study. And, it's something that we're going to really look for in the fourth season is a deeper connection into Taoism. And Taoism is the study of Pisces. Pisces, you learn more about Pisces by studying subjects outside of Pisces. You can't directly find Pisces. Like Scorpio, you start getting in there and you start learning about the esoteric and symbols, and you can go down that rabbit hole. Pisces isn't it's not a direct learning study. You can kind of directly understand Aries by studying it. You have to circumvent. You have to go in circles around Pisces because Pisces is the circle. The studying of the yin yang will give you a much better understanding of Pisces, better than any astrological book on Pisces. Because a lot of times you read stuff, you'll read an astrological book about Pisces, and the person did a great, brilliant job of explaining it, but you'll walk away and be like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
Because you can't even directly touch it. Just for the fact that we haven't even, look at how we've even approached this labor.
Yeah.
We haven't touched this labor like we've done the other labors. No, we go circles around it because that's what it teaches you, round and round, up and down. It's this process of that we have to kind of go through. We can't just be direct with it because it's all encompassing, and as we try to collapse Pisces into words, Pisces dissolves.
Right.
And that's what it represents. It's the water that dissolves everything. Even when I started doing natal charts, the process, why I hesitated at first was because I'm like, I don't know how to explain the 12th house.
Yeah.
Or I don't have a lot of words for Pisces. So what I did is I went and I literally formulated a whole list of ways to explain Pisces. Truly, that list has dissolved. Either the word loses its significance or the true paper that it was written on disappears because you can't contain it. And it was part of the lesson of Pisces. Pisces, you can't contain me in words. You can't contain me in any kind of form. I'm the structure and I'm the space in between. And that's what we really kind of learn with. And that's what we kind of get connected with as we kind of approach this, this deeper pattern, almost a karmic pattern that is presented in this process.
Well, that's great, man. That's news to me to talk about this with season 4. I'm excited for that because, and what I mean by news for me is that we will be talking about Taoism, but to incorporate Pisces. I like how you said it is the circle, so we dance around the circle, and that's very wise, my friend. Just because it's true. I mean, whether it's even explaining Christ, or Vishnu, or explaining what this really represents becomes this arduous task where you might find yourself coming back and saying, wait, did I explain that right? And then you try to explain to a child why Christ was important. But if you really take a deep dive into that and, from just a surface area of, he was a good man who, people were trying to, follow his lead, you still might be playing with the definition in your mind for quite some time after going, next time I see that child, I'm going to tell him, no, but there was also, I feel like you never really finish. And I think that's a great power that Christ, or the idea of many of these, whether it's a religious organization or a spiritual path that you take, some of them, like you said, in Taoism is being a disservice to explain it. That's the whole, not gimmick, but the whole power that it holds of just it's always going to be pondering in your mind, which is going to allow you to continuously evolve. Because if you were to figure it out all at once, well, then your journey must have already ended. And what else are you here to do? And I think that there's not a need to finish the work. I think the work is ongoing for eternity. And I think that these, individuals who, carried this knowledge knew that and left you sort of wondering how to continuously evolve. Whether you're ready or not, you'll do that when your time is right. And I think that that's what's really important. And man, I am excited for season 4, not to conclude that, but I did like that you just said that we have danced around this labor. And I think it brings me a lot of peace, just because when I was thinking about every day that we were considering when are we going to get together and do this episode, I did feel not empty-handed, but I felt like, well, there's so many ways that I can go about this. Do I ask questions? But once again, when I sit with you, the greatest honor, aside from this being something we do for many listeners out there, is just being able to have that confirmation with you of, hey, is there a right way, and what is the way? And I think that's a question that, we'll always ask for eternity if we really are hungry and curious for the evolution of not just ourselves, but for humanity as a whole. Is the work done? The work is not done. And I think that that's what I kind of gathered from this labor. Now, of course, there are some very to the point situations that occur with Hercules in this labor. But I think you've said this before, and there's something that made me think of you, and I wanted to say this really quick, is, when he slays or understands the human monster, or, the 3 men that are united, the physical and the emotional and the mental. Thank you. We've talked about that multiple times here through this series in the podcast, whether it's season 2 or 3 or, the one that's to come. And that's something that really stuck out to me with what the final labor of Hercules is, understanding what those 3 individuals represent and how to incorporate all 3, before you just, kill the 3-bodied man, So, yeah.
Yeah, and with that circle, Pisces is a space too that like the universe brings back lessons to be like, oh, how strong are you with this declaration that you made?
Right.
Because it's like one of those things where I'll go through like a space and I'll just be like, no, maybe I'm like good with romance. Like I just need to focus on myself, and maybe this is like an independent journey I have. And then I like walk through the grocery store and I just like fall in love with the person at the bakery, and I'm like, oh, like my heart hits it again. It's just like, you weren't done with love, you silly little man. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Like it comes back around, and you're
Totally.
like, oh, like be careful of like the statements you make, because like, you don't know what's coming, and there's
Right.
these things that happen. And that's this like unique kind of process of like even that idea of redancing with the physical, mental, and the emotional bodies.
Right.
And so it's so funny that was a challenge for us this time, because we're like, oh no, we're in Pisces. But it's funny because like, Pisces ebbs and flows as well. And it's sometimes you got it and sometimes you don't. But it's just interesting, jealousy, negative self-thinking, depression. These things are going to come back around. Like, yeah, you transcend them, but the universe is going to bring it back around of
Right.
like, well, I got an opportunity for you to beat the shit out of yourself again. Are you going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's when you have to like rise above it and be like, no, I've got this protection of this golden chalice. I'm not going to, entertain that wave anymore.
Right.
And I'm just going to let that surrender and fall to the ground. And so it's a really important space to know that like, everything's going to kind of come back around. That lower ego that we've discarded is like yearning for life again. It's yearning for its host that it was so comfortable in for like 24, 25 years. And so now it's just like, how do I gain re-control? So we'll re-pull those things back. And this is where we really spiritually kind of set ourselves and be like, no, I'm anew. I'm in the womb to be born again.
Right.
And my journey is to transcend all of those. And I have other things that I need to encounter. And there's other healing that needs to be done, not only just in regards to my own self, but the collective. Because what we learn with Pisces is if there's one person suffering in this world, we're all suffering. We're all connected. We do have a responsibility to alleviate the suffering of all human consciousness, but it starts with us. You can't save the world without, going in and saving yourself first. And then you start from there and you move slowly. You go and you save yourself, and then you can influence the family,
Right.
the community, and you make your way out. But it's got to work that way. We've seen, individuals with great intentions become tyrants because they didn't, conquer their own internal demons and transmute those demons into expressions of an angel, which we all have to do with that incorporation process. And so, fascinating story with Pisces, my friend.
That is. A lot of lessons that we had to learn throughout the process. And I know same thing with, of course, our savior here, Hercules. And, there's so much that we've already talked about, and it gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that we were able to get to this point of having not only a great understanding of the challenges that will continuously come and find out whether we are ready for them to be met, or will we fight them off and start all over from the beginning. This story has helped me greatly just because I'm a visual learner, and I think what Alice Bailey has done and the rest of the individuals who put this book together, and highly recommend, reading The Labors of Hercules by Alice Bailey, have done a wonderful job at sort of, presenting that, to us. The thing that always keeps coming to mind for me is it's very easy to train your physical body to swim upstream when the current is taking you in a direction you don't want to go in, and also wanting to help a person drowning in that stream being pulled to their ultimate death, jumping in the water and trying to pull them out. But really, the lessons come from you having the ability to tell that person while they're drowning or while they're suffering to just let go. Let the stream take you where it was meant to go, because you already let go. And once you're able to do that, you can tell others that it's not so bad once you let go. And it's easy for us to want to swim as hard as we can with our physical body away from this, ultimate death or danger that lies at the very bottom or on the other side of wherever this stream might take you. And we see this throughout the entire story of Hercules. He has the physical strength to swim upstream, but what is he doing, and why is he not letting go? And when he starts to let go, you start to see this evolution in this beautiful individual, which is us, So, yeah, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like, it's kind of like when you go to like a water park, if anybody's ever been able to experience it. Like as a child, you really love the wave pool, but then as an adult, you're like, nah, the lazy river is where it's at. You know what I mean? Like you're like, nah, this is chill.
That's so true, though.
But it's kind of like that process. Like, yeah, it's like fun to fight the wave. And you're supposed to, as a young kid, face those waves, right, and feel the crashing of those waves against us in life. And that's why we were, skateboarding, punk rock music, doing all those things that we did as a child. And then as you get into an adult, you're just like, rather than just like going head first against these things, I'm just going to kind of go with the flow. And then it's just like this kind of chilled thing. And I mean, of course, there's better natural ways to do that. I would rather say the ocean over a river, because there's not a bunch of people peeing in it and stuff like that. But like, yeah, it's an interesting kind of analogy of what we learn through the process of maturity.
Yeah, well said, man. Well, I'm excited to break down part 2. I know we brought up a lot of Pisces in this episode, but part 2, I'll have a little more of a discussion about where the final, where our thoughts are on the final season of season 3, which is happening now, and where we're going to go with season 4, which I'm really excited for, just because we're going to take a small break to sort of put that all together. And not only visit some new topics, but maybe revisit some topics that we mentioned in season 2 that we would bring up. And I think now is the time to do that. And so, very exciting, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think there's a lot of rehashing because of, just like when we kind of saw that breakdown of Pinocchio, of how that went so much deeper than other movies that we were able to. Well, it's because this common language has been formed, and so we can go deeper into these subjects and these topics that we have explored. So it allows for us to have deeper conversations. And so, I think season 4 is also going to contain bringing back alchemical conversations about the alchemical process. And I think it would be a great way to even go back to like the 7 Hermetic principles and relook at those with a new lens and a new sight and see the deeper information we can kind of extrapolate out of those texts and those fundamental foundations of this thing that we call consciousness.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. I love it. Well, great. So what I'll do is sign off now and, prepare for, the ending of season 3, which, again, I'm so excited for season 4. So thank you again to all the Patreon members and all the members all together on our website and all those who listen and leave constructive comments. It's because of you that we'll be making not only a solid season 4, but also answering a lot of the questions that have been brought up in the last couple seasons about when will we revisit some topics and when will we clarify something we might have mentioned. And so we really appreciate that because, through you and through our conversations, we're all just learning a little bit more. And if maybe you're an expert on this and maybe you're new to this, we welcome you with open arms because, these conversations would happen no matter what between my friend Daniel here and I, even if we didn't have this podcast. So it's an honor to be able to do this. So thank you.
Oh, most definitely. Beautiful, my friend.
Cool, man. Well, until next time.
Until next time.
Sweet.